Hello everyone, I'm Ravi Verma, co-founder and CTO of IMESH. Today we'll be going through architecture of Envoy and we'll be implementing a demo sample for L7 proxy of HTTP. But before we start with directly implementation, let's have a look on a little bit of understanding what is Envoy architecture and how it works. So for that, let's try to understand a few things. Envoy is having multiple parts, and it is major components are listener, network chain filters, router, cluster. So those are combined together are part of Envoy. So we'll try to understand a bit of each. So it's like we have a listener. Listener is nothing but IP address and port. So on which a particular host is listening. So any request comes from downstream, like any client, that goes first to a listener. So listener listens or at a particular port on which that request is first forwarded. After that, it goes through a series of chains, filter chains, which is called filter chains here. And once it passes all the chains, it's a kind of chaining and kind of rules in which if a particular rule is not satisfied, that connection can be broken at that particular point of time. Once it goes through all the chains, then it goes to HTTP router. So that is for L7 proxy, it is very much required. So HTTP router at the end, it is required, router filter. So again, it's part of filter chain, but it is a specific filter chain for HTTP related requests. Once it passes through router, HTTP router, then it goes to a cluster. Cluster is nothing but a collection of endpoints upstream where it is pointing to upstream applications. So cluster. And cluster will be forwarding the request to upstream hosts. Like suppose app1. It's a collection of basically similar kind of application. So app1 replicas basically, or we can have another applications also. App1. So these are the endpoints, and cluster is collection of endpoints. So this is a very much high level working of Envoy, how it works. First it takes a connection, then it goes to a series of filter chains, then that request is forwarded to cluster, and then it goes to upstream. Yeah, so that's very much. Then now we'll be moving towards the installation of Envoy, and after that we'll be going for the demo. For installation, we need to fire a set of commands that is required currently because for Linux, Envoy is not officially released in, like I'll be using Ubuntu. So in that Ubuntu repo, it's not officially released from Envoy. So that's where it is taking from a custom or a specific server. For that, we need to fire few extra commands. Otherwise, if we want to install it directly, like if it is officially available, then only this first command and okay. So it is for Red Hat. I'll be using for Ubuntu. So only like 2 commands will be enough in that case, like apt update, and then second will be apt install Envoy. So that should be fine for installation. But we need to do fewer extra steps because currently it's not officially released on Linux repo. So let's go ahead and install it. So for that, I'll be connecting to Linux server. Yeah, so first command, let's update our repo. Then we'll be following series of commands to install Envoy. So first is sudo update update. So few dependencies would be required because it's external server. For that, we'll be needing some supporting packages to install Envoy. So here we go. Okay. So it should be restarted on this. Let it install. Keys. This one will verify whether the keys are okay. Sorry. Next one. Okay. Now we'll be adding repo. Once repo is added, we need to again update so that it can fetch the repo information. And after that, we can install Envoy very much easily. So we are going a set of commands to check out different distro like Red Hat or Mac. You can go with this link, and then it is having a following instructions like different architectures, different few different commands are there. We can go and install directly from there. Okay, it's still fetching information. Let's wait for a few seconds. Done. Now we are installing Envoy. It should not take much time. It will be done within few minutes or even early. Okay, installation is going on. Let's wait. It's taking a bit of time. Yeah. Okay. So it's done. Now we can verify whether it installed successfully or not with envoy-hyphen version. So here we can see we have Envoy installed already, and it is having pointing to 1.18.2 version. That's it. So successfully installed. Let's move towards the demo. We'll be creating a L7 proxy today, and we'll see how it works, basically how it is redirecting traffic to different services. So next we'll be seeing demo. Let's move. Yeah, to start with, let's create one sample application, a service which is listening on certain port, so that once we get a request on Envoy, that can be proxied to a backend service, basically. So let's create one sample application. I'll be creating sample Flask application to quickly run it. So I'm giving a name Flask app1.py. Let's write it quickly. App is equal to Flask. So creating a Flask application. So if you're not aware of this, no need to worry. It's a just sample application to showcase the routing. So whichever application you are comfortable, you can take that approach, like whichever language. So it is not necessarily this same thing need to be followed. So I'm giving a route. So it is main route. It will take, once it hits this route, it will be redirecting to this basically method. So hello world I'm giving, and we'll be returning something like hello from this application. So hello. So let's add a para. Hello world. Closing. To run it quickly, we can either run it using Flask, or if you want to directly run with Python, we can add this few lines below. So I'm adding just it so that we can easily start. App.run. Suppose I'm giving 3000, so it will be running on 3000 port. So let's add some information so that we'll be knowing from which application we are getting requests. So let's add that port value as well, 3000. Okay. So let's start it. Python Flask app 1. So it's running on 3000. We can verify that by going to localhost 3000. So it's running, up and running directly. Now we'll be writing Envoy configuration. So let's create it. I'm giving name as Envoy HTTP proxy YAML. Let's start. So we'll be today seeing static configuration. So we'll go with static configuration implementation. So if you no need to worry about all the sections, but yeah, these are kind of minimum things would be required to showcase how it is, the flow is working. Okay, so first thing is static, because we are statically defining, that's why. Resources. Then we need to define first thing is listener. We saw in the diagram, like first thing is listener. So listeners will be defining on particular port, on which port this Envoy will be listening. So listeners, and then we need to give a name. So any name we can give. I'm giving just listener 1. That's it. So now we need to give address. on which IP and which port it is listening. So that for that we need to define socket address. And in that we need to define address. So 0 dot, this is a wildcard address I'm giving. Basically, it's listening to all interfaces. If a particular PC is having multiple interfaces, we need to give IP of a particular interface so that it is listening on that. So currently it's listening on all the interfaces. Port value we need to give. So suppose I'm giving 8080. So this is the port on which Envoy will be listening and will be sending the request on this port. So second thing in that diagram we saw is a filter chain. So now we need to define filter chains. So network filters we need to define. So that should be there under after listener inside that. So let's add it. Filter chains. So we need to make sure we are not making any typo error and space related because it's a YAML. So it is very space sensitive. And sometimes that create problems. So let's try to write it. Filters we are defining, then we need to define a filter. For this one, we'll be using only one filter. Let's use that, and that will be using that HTTP connection manager filter because we are giving the demo of L7 proxy. So that's a kind of very high level, but yeah, we'll be using only one network filter for this demo. So we need to give a name of that particular filter. What's network HTTP connection manager. So this is one of the network filter. It is usually used at the end of the filter chain if we are using L7 proxy, and after this router is added. So this is last in the list of the filter chain, but as we are using only one, so we'll be using this one only. So name is done. Now we need to give which type it is. It is internally used by Envoy. So we need to define, basically mention which type it was using. So it's kind of class, like which class will be handling this request. So it's, you can imagine similar to that. types.google-apis.com/envoy.extensions.filter. Filters. Okay, I think it should be filters here as well. Filters, then network. HTTP connection manager .v3 version is the latest version currently. HTTP connection manager. So if you see, it's look like it is having it is defined in this class. So this is a type config which is handling that request. So you can think of that way. So now we have to give some name. So stat prefix. Any name we can give. So let's give HTTP proxy so that we can identify it. And after that, we need to add HTTP filters for HTTP related activities. So filters. Okay, so let's add router filter. So this should be the end of that one. Like when we are using HTTP related thing, the router filter should be the at the last. So as we are not using anything special in between, so we'll be using this one only. So let's add it. So let's give again name and which router filter we need to use, that will be defining here again. So filter .http router. So again typed config, same thing, similar structure. So this is the type of that. Should be again type dot Google APIs.com as web extensions. Dot filter http dot router dot v3 dot router. So now we need to define, next thing is route config, like now where the request will go once we get a request. So that we'll be defining in route config, and there will be defining match rules, like which rules once it matches, what happens. So we'll see that. So route config, we need to give a name, any name we can give of our choice. So I'm giving HTTP local proxy. We need to define virtual host. So currently it is having only one host, like local host we are using. So we'll be defining only one virtual host for now. Okay. We'll give name again, any name. So let's give HTTP local host. Then we'll define on which domain we are listening this one. Currently, like it's a local host, so and we are not using any domain name. So let's put it a star so that it listens to all the requests basically on. So, okay, then we need to define route. And we need to define match rules, like what all the rules to be matched. So let's use first prefix. If prefix is class, it's a root route. So redirect all those things to this cluster. A specific cluster will be routing that. So route, once if it is root route, then you route all the requests to cluster, any cluster name we can give. So suppose we are giving cluster name 1. But now we have not defined any cluster. So where that request will be going. So definitely we need to define a cluster so that this request will be forwarded and handled by upstream inside that cluster. So let's add cluster. So we need to add it under static configuration parallel to listener. Clusters, then name of the cluster. So this cluster name and this cluster name should match. Cluster underscore 1. So it is identifying with this cluster name. So it should be matching this name. Then we need to define what is the type of it. So currently let's use strict DNS. No need to worry about this. We'll explain in future sessions. After that, we need to define connect timeout. So let's use 2 seconds. So like if it is not connecting within 2 seconds, it will just tell me out. Then we need to give load balancer policy. So let's use for now round robin so that it goes inside all the endpoints. It will be hitting like one by one in round robin fashion. Robin. After that, we need to define load assignments. So load assignment. So here we'll be giving cluster name. Here we can give any name. So let's use flask app. And we'll be defining endpoints like as we saw, like cluster is collection of endpoints. So we'll be defining number of endpoints here, which will be handled by this cluster, and it will be forwarding request to any one of the endpoint based on the policy, basically. So let's define endpoints. So load balanced endpoints, basically, we are defining endpoints, fine. And then we'll be defining endpoint. So again, we need to add address, like once we get a request where it should be sending the request to upstream. So that will be defining now. Address, similar structure as we saw. Socket address. So it's running on localhost, so we'll be giving localhost only. Port value. So as we have defined in our first application, it's listening and running on 3000 port. So let's use that one. So that we'll be able to verify. Okay, so pretty much we are done. Looks like. Let's try running it. If all goes well, it should run. So let me open another terminal to run it. To run, we need to give envoy -c, see which config file to take. So I'll be using envoy http YAML. Oh, so something is wrong. Let's check where we did some typo mistake or indentation error. That will be there. Let's verify it quickly. Let us see where it's giving error. Measurement envoy bootstrap thing. Typed config cannot find as unknown build. Okay. Let's see. So it should be listener. Inside listeners, we need to give name of the listeners. So it should be the same indentation. Then we need to give filter. We need to define filters. Let's check the name envoy filters. Typed config. Oh, sorry. So this one we made a mistake. It should be under this one. So it is defined for this HTTP filter. Let's try now. Okay, it is having some indentation, looks like error. Let's see. Filters. filters, name, filters. Okay, network HTTP connection manager. Then we have typed config, type Google, type.google APIs, extensions, then filters, HTTP connection manager, network. It's fine. It's fine. HTTP filters. We need to give. That's fine. Okay. And then we need to define envoy filter HTTP router. That's fine. Type config. Set that, and we need to give type. Then route config. Name virtual hosts. Name domain routes match. Route. Okay. Let's go and check error. Envoy config bootstrap 3 invalid argument route config route cannot find field. Okay, so something is wrong here. Just let me see. Typed config. We have type. Then stat prefix we give. HTTP filter. Name type. Then we need to define route config. Route config will have name. Virtual host. That we need to define name. Domains should be routes, not route. Because here we can define multiple routes. So we'll see that as well. Okay, let's try. Fine. Now it's running. So let's go ahead and hit our localhost at 080. Yeah, here we go. So it's running, it is forwarding the request to 3000. So let's try adding more services and see how it is kind of redirecting and distributing the loads to different services. So for that, let's do one thing, add more services. So let's create 2 more copies of this. So let's give a name as app2 and make it 4000 so that we'll know from this service we are getting request 4000. Let's run another one. For that, let's give a name as 3, make it 5000. Okay, let's run it quickly. So I can open a terminal from here as well. So Flask app 1 already running, will be running 2 and 3 from here. So it's running at 4000. Let's add another one more terminal. Python 3. This one is running on 5000. So let's add that routes inside this, like basically new instances in the cluster, more endpoints. So let's copy this endpoint and add 2 more. Let's set this will be redirected 4000. This will be redirected to 5000. Fine. Let's run. It's running now. Now we can try. So we are hitting 8080. If we refresh, we should be getting different ports. So basically it is load balancing the request to all three backend services. So if you see 5,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So you can see. Yeah, so we saw pretty much like we configured three services, we configured Envoy, and now we are able to see how this HTTP level routing is working. So that's all for this session. We'll be coming with more information, more demo in future sessions. For now, this is it for today's session. If any question, please contact us at imesh.ai. Thank you.